So when I'm talking about typography, I'm thinking like you open a Word document, you start typing, you send an email, things on like this poster. And when I say legibility, I'm talking about your brain's ability to distinguish letters from each other. So I'm going to talk about 3 characteristics that impact different fonts and different types. So like Times New Roman or like Garamond.
Comic Sans.
Yeah, Comic Sans was a hot topic earlier. So I have my elephant and giraffe friend. We're going to talk about thicks and thins. So we got our thin giraffe and our thick, strong elephant. I'm going to talk about X height and counters. I'm sorry to disappoint you. We're not going to talk about marble. And serif and sans serif. And what I just want you to remember are feet or no feet. That's all you have to remember. So thick and thins are giraffe and elephant friends. The first font, this is called Bodani, and it's a great example of just showing contrast within a font. So you have this really thick portion of an O and this thin portion here. You can kind of just see how it carries throughout the font. So you're seeing it really big. You can see just the contrast. Really wide parts, really thin parts. And here is the letter M in 4 different fonts. And you can see how there are strong contrasts here, but not so much here. Same size, and you can see how this M differs from different fonts. And here are our fonts to remind you. So depending on if you can read this, these are 2 paragraphs set in 2 different fonts. And this font up here has high contrast within the letters, and this font has even contrast with the thicks and thins. So realistically, this font up here is harder to read because there's so much visual vibrancy. Can you see that?
Yes.
Okay. I didn't know how it would come across on screen. And this is not necessarily a bad thing. It's just where the font is being used. Because this high contrast font is used in your favorite magazines. But it's only used for 4 letters. So it looks great. It pops. So depending on where the font is used, you can use that to your advantage. Where here, it's not really easy to read. But here, this is iconic. So those are our giraffe and elephant friends with thick and thins. So X height and counters, they kind of go together. So just remember how tall our X is, and then this really has nothing to do. I just wanted to give you a visual. So here is Mickey Mouse on, your 3 lines of type. I'm probably going to go over the time limit.
It's fine.
Going.
Drink.
Yeah, I got my beer. I'm prepared for it. So going back to elementary school. So counters are these holes in your letters right here. So here's your whole line of letters that have holes in them. They're called counters. Looks nothing like the picture I gave you. X height is the baseline to this dashed line here. And it comes from the idea of how tall the X is in that particular font. That's
Drink.
So the idea is if you have bigger counters within that font and you have taller X heights, it's easier to read. So why is that? It's because the type is more open. There's the idea behind it. So generally fonts that have bigger counters in them and taller X heights are easier to read. So here's another word that has some counters highlighted for you. And here's our reminders down here. Your X height, not a count. Well, it is a counter, but. So here are our 2 fonts, Garamond and Freight Text. And you can see just very vaguely that this is a little bit taller than this guy. They have taller X heights and bigger counters, but they're the same size font. So realistically, this one might be easier to read. And here are 2 paragraphs to kind of test that. So Garamond, and this one has bigger counters and taller X heights.
So the same font size?
Same font size.
Oh. Whoa.
So third one, this one's open for debate and interpretation. Feet, no feet. That's how I like to remember it. Serif, sans serif. Cool thing. Oh, here's my joke. Yes. Okay, so we're going to go to foot fetish. Yes. Okay, so when I'm talking about serifs, I'm talking about feet. I'm talking about these little notches at the bottom of all these letters. And they're called serifs because they're at the end of a stroke. It's like you're painting. I'm totally over. It's almost over.
Drink a lot.
Mm-hmm.
I give you a 10-second buffer. Too.
Okay, well, I'm going to keep talking because this is cool.
That's why we're here, but it doesn't mean I'm not going to make you drink.
Fair game, fair game.
I get to hold the timer when you go.
So, brief history. Back when you were carving your type into stone, you were generally following someone who painted the type on the rock. Well, there's a brush stroke that finishes the H. So that's where these lines come from. There's history to these lines, which is super cool. No lines. No lines. Although this type is considered super modern, sans serif, no feet. There is a debate whether one is more legible than the other, because this one says that because you have feet, you can mimic these lines that you're used to reading when you read across type. But this one, since there's no feet, there's less to interpret and less visual clutter. So you guys can decide what is easier to read, although I may have cheated because this one has bigger X height. So, mind blown. So here are our friends. And that is all.
Yay!